Hello, and welcome to my channel, Crafty Gal Confessions. If you've made it to this tutorial, you are undoubtedly a fellow Bluey fan. And if you're a Bluey fan, you probably already know how fun Janet and Rita are. I'm talking about Bluey and Bingo's Here Come the Grannies characters that make an appearance in multiple episodes. If there's one thing that you should know about me as a mama, but also as a crafter, I am so extra, y'all. And I couldn't just make a Bluey costume. Come on, we needed some accessories. What better than these super easy Grannies inspired ponchos? This poncho tutorial is the third episode of my 3-part series, all featuring components from my DIY Bluey and Bingo inspired costumes. This tutorial was created as a no-sew option, but if you do know how to sew, you can easily take all my measurements and adapt them to a sewn version. Before we get started, please note that you can find a full write-up on this tutorial, as well as links for the exact fabric colors I used, the glasses, and the grabber toy all shown in my pictures. Now let's do a quick rundown on the supplies you're going to need to complete this project. We do need jersey knit fabric in 2 colors, the 2 colors that best represent whichever character it is you're making. We're going to construct the entire thing using heat and bond, soft stretch, fusible webbing. I am using a cutting mat with a rotary knife and quilter's ruler in this tutorial, but those things can be bypassed with just sharp scissors and a yardstick if you don't have these supplies available. I'm also using binding clips to hold things together as I go along, but this can be achieved with just regular straight pins. And you will of course need an iron to fuse that heat bond together. So let's get started. Here is your fabric cut list. We're going to need to go ahead and cut all these pieces out ahead of time before we start ironing anything together. Make sure that you do pre-wash and dry your fabric ahead of time. I know that knit fabric will often shrink up a little wonky, especially when it's cheaper fabric like this, and it was definitely an issue, so I was glad that I did do that. You can see in some parts of my video just how crazy the shrinkage was on some of those edges, and I did struggle with it a little bit trying to straighten out the fabric and get a good piece cut from it. So definitely make sure that you do try to pre-shrink it ahead of time to avoid shrinkage in your finished piece. First, I'm cutting my larger body piece. I do this one by folding the fabric with one edge of it giving me enough space to get 18 inches in length. That 18 inches is half the 36 inches of length that we need total. But you don't want to just fold your fabric in half and then cut from that, because you won't end up with a big enough piece to get your hood from. So make note of how I'm folding that and then cut your piece from that. So this allows me to cut an 18-inch by 24-inch piece on the fold through both layers, and that's going to give me the full-size piece that's needed. Then I move on to cutting the hood piece. Cut that 14 by 21-inch piece from the leftover body color. Now moving on to the trim color pieces. I did this one with the fabric doubled up, cutting through both layers, getting identical 7 by 24-inch pieces. Now let's get started fusing everything together. I do have an extra pair of hands on this one helping in the video, and she's doing some of the ironing while I'm figuring out composition of the piece. So I'm going to give you a closer look at what she's doing with the heat and bond. First, measuring out a strip of bond that is the same length of the long end of your hood piece. Then ironing that glue side down right up against the edge. Once it's cooled a bit, peel that white paper off the bond strip, fold it over, and iron it down again. This is going to create a finished edge that'll be the edge of the hood closest to the face. You do have to apply a little bit of pressure and heat here to get the bond to take, so definitely check and make sure everything has fused properly. That heat will give the fabric a slightly discolored look. Don't worry about that. It will go back to normal once it's cooled down. Next, we will be fusing the back seam of the hood. We're going to fold that hood piece in half with the raw edge of the finish we just did exposed. So essentially, folding the hood in half and inside out. You can see that raw edge I'm talking about there at the top of the frame, so just check to make sure you're correct on this fold before ironing anything. I'll admit we did mess this up a little on the first try. This seam is opposite the side of the finished edge you already did. You are going to be ironing your strip sandwiched between the two layers of fabric. So go ahead and iron down against the paper, snip and peel that off, then lay your top layer down over that neatly against the edge and iron again. Check to make sure everything is fused properly before moving on. I now have the body piece folded in half, so we're looking at an 18 by 24 inch piece. Think of that fold as where the shoulders will go. Now I'm going to fold that in half to establish where the middle of the shoulders will be, and I'm marking the center of that with a binding clip. This is where we need to cut the hole for the neckline. Next, we will take the hood piece and flip it right side out. So this conceals that back seam inside the hood. The edge that's left unfinished on the hood is the edge that's going to fuse to your neckline. So lay your hood nice and flat up against your fold and use a pencil to mark where that cut should start. Quick tip here, go ahead and mark that spot about 2 centimeters shorter than the length you just measured. I didn't account for the stretch of the fabric and ended up having a slightly raw edge in the very front of the hood that I ended up patching later. I also seem to have a hard time locating my pencil, so you see me holding that spot with my finger, and then I line it up with the ruler and make a nice straight cut. Unfolded, here's how that looks. Moving on, we apply the fusible tape to the perimeter of the hood where it will attach to the neckline. Note here that the tape is being applied to the opposite side of the raw edges on the hood. So if you look closely, you can see what I mean. We're only looking at the finished edges of the hood as we are applying the tape. The section of fusible is going to be sandwiched between the two right sides of the pieces on the neckline. We did also try doubling up on the fusible with this one. The other poncho that I made first did have a couple spots on the finished neckline that kept pulling loose, and I was repeatedly re-ironing them. So this time we used 2 layers of the tape, hoping that would help solve the issue. It was noticeably thicker with the adhesive, but it did have a stronger hold. Now we are moving into what I found to be the trickiest part of the project, and it's also the trickiest to explain. I'm clipping the edge that we just added fusible to the neckline hole of the body, starting with lining up the back seam of the hood against the back point of the cut. Then I continue clipping that hood into place, working my way down each side toward the front until the entire hood is clipped into place. Again, we are sandwiching the fusible between the two right sides of the project. This is what's going to create our nice finished seam. Moving back over to the iron, we can now proceed with fusing that hood to the body. Carefully pulling off the clips and ironing in small sections at a time. Once I've worked my way all the way around, you can see me start stretching at the neckline. I'm making sure that everything stays fused as I tug at it, because the neckline is going to withstand the most tension, so you want to make sure it has a nice strong bond. There at the end, when I lay the project down, you can see that spot that I mentioned in the front from not accounting for the stretch on my neckline. I'm stepping aside to create myself a little patch with a piece of scrap fabric and some fusible tape to strengthen that spot. We are ready to attach the bottom trim pieces. Go ahead and apply the fusible to the right side of the bottom edge. Once that's cooled, peel up the paper and neatly line up your trim piece with your fusible. Iron that down into place, and then repeat with the second piece on the other side of the poncho. Here come the grannies. We are all done, y'all. There were a couple little flubs with this one, working with that fusible for the first time. And I did decide to go ahead and reinforce my seams with the sewing machine since I'm able to do that. I do just love these pieces, and our girls had so much fun wearing them. I wanted to make sure that they hold up for a long time. So if you do have the ability to sew, I would recommend just going that route instead. But overall, these grannies are so cute, and I'm excited to see them wearing these this coming Halloween. Be sure to head on over to my blog post for the step-by-step on this tutorial, as well as all the links that you need. And of course, happy crafting!